All right, question 8. Question 8 is really tough. Remember question 7? That was fun. That was easy. Now we're on to a really tougher question 8. And you're like, oh, why is it going to get tougher? And you're like, oh, you're taking this test. You might be taking it for a long, long time, and you get an easy question, you get an easy question. You're like, oh, I know how to do this. And then you get a really tough one. You gotta muscle through it. You just gotta keep plowing ahead. You can do this. You know all the individual steps. You just gotta put them together into a big long march to get where you want to go. But here we are. What is the value of the expression below? Negative 0.75 minus a negative 2/5 plus 0.4 plus negative 3/4. Hey, and your answers are all in decimals. So like, I have decimals, I have fractions, my answers are in decimals, I should change my fractions to decimals. That's a good first step, and after you do that, it's going to go get tougher and tougher and tougher, but we can get through this. Okay, so let's do it. First, we have 2/5 and 3/4, right? Because we want to change 2/5, and we'll deal with the negative in a second, but we want to change 2/5 to a decimal and 3/4 to a decimal. So how do we do that? Well, let's get them over 10 and over 100, because that turns numbers into decimals, doesn't it? 5 times 2 is 10, so whatever you do to the bottom, do the same thing to the top. 2 times 2 is 4. 4/10 equals 0.4, because that's 4/10. We should remember that. It should be pretty clear to us that 2/5 equals 4/10 equals 0.4. Okay, 3/4. Well, 4 times 25 gets 100, so 3 times 25, we'll multiply 3 times 25, because whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. And again, 75 over 100 equals 0.75, because this is hundredths, right? 4/10, tenths place, and 4/100ths, the hundredths place. Now, if you had a calculator for this question, which you may or may not, you could always do 2 divided by 5, right? Because this 2/5 is 2 divided by 5. And what will that equal on your calculator? We'll be shocked to know it'll equal 0.4. So that's a good way to do it if you have a calculator for this one. And then same thing, 3/4 is 3 divided by 4. And if you do that, you will surely get 0.75. Okay, so that's how we take the fractions and turn them into decimals. And here we go. Let's rewrite it as negative 0.75 minus negative 0.4 plus 0.4 plus negative 0.75. Okay, that is what we have to deal with. That is what we have to deal with. And as you see, the first 2 lines of this next page just have it rewritten for us. So let's get going here. That's the original, and we shift out the excuse me, we shift out the fractions for decimals, and here we are. Now, what do we have? What do we have with this minus the negative, right? What do we have with this minus the negative? We've just found out, and we just went over it, that the rule is minus a negative equals adding a positive. Minus a negative equals adding a positive. We keep the first same number, we minus a negative, we get to add a positive. Okay, so we keep the first same number, it's negative 0.75. We minus a negative, what do we get? That's adding a positive. So that becomes, minusing a negative becomes plus 0.4. We keep going, we just bring the rest of it down, 0.4 and plus negative 0.75. Okay, well, what can we do now? If you remember the commutative property of addition that we just talked about, we can shift the order around, right? We can move the positives to one side and the negatives to another side, because 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 3 plus 2 plus 1. So let's do that. Let's bring the positives over here and bring the negatives over there. We have positive 0.4 plus positive 0.4 plus negative 0.75 plus negative 0.75. And you really want it to be like positive 0.4 minus or plus negative 0.4, so they can cancel out and become 0, but they just don't. You have 0.4 plus 0.4 plus negative 0.75 plus negative 0.75. If you have negative 0.75, just move it over. And there we go. So what can we do with that? Well, let's add them together. We should be able to add 0.04, and this is the associative property addition. We should be able to add 0.04 plus 0.04 relatively easy. I think everyone's going to know what we're going to get there. We have to remember that negative 0.75 plus negative 0.75 is like, you know, going down and then going down again. So how far do you go down? Well, you go down the total amount plus the total amount again. So what you do when you have negative 7.5 doom plus negative, again, 0.75, is you add them together, and where you'll end up on the number line is negative 1.50. So you add them together and carry forward the negative sign. You add them together and carry forward the negative sign, and you will get negative 1.5 for negative 0.75 plus negative 0.75, and you'll get 0.8 for 0.4 plus 0.4. Wow, we still have a lot of work to do. Now, what do we do? How do we go forward now? We have negative 0.8, I'm sorry, positive 0.8 plus negative 1.5. So if we draw it out on the number line, and I guess we'll just use this number line again. We have positive 0.8, so that's there. That's positive 0.8. And we have minus, so up to 0.8, and then minus 1.5. And where do we end up? Where do we end up? After we go up 0.8 and then down 1.5. Well, as we know, the first 0.8 of this 1.5 will be used to get back to 0, right? So the first 0.8 of this 1.5 will be used to get back to 0. So how much of this 1.5, this negative 1.5, do we have left? Well, what's the difference? What's 1.5 minus 0.8? We do that, we get 0.7. So we know we have 0.7 left to go negative. We start out at 0.8 positive. We lose 1.5. The first 0.8 of that 1.5 gets us back to 0. And how much do we have left to travel negative? We have 0.7 left to travel negative. So our answer is we're going to end up in the negative zone. We're going to end up at negative 0.07. And if we flip way back to our answer choices, here we go. It's B. We're good to go.